Oh. All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining the class this evening. So it's another exciting opportunity we're going to have this evening. Right. So I will go ahead and share my screen right now so that you can see my screen and so that we can begin the class straight away. All right. Let me open my Power BI. So the rule of the class is still the same, just like we have always had it. Okay, so if you have any question that you want to ask, type it in the live chat so that I would see it. I have a dashboard in front of me. I would see it, and then we can solve all of them. So this is a DAX summary class. So what I want to achieve in this class is to introduce us to DAX. I mean, you have been introduced already, but I want to take us the basics of DAX, and then I also want to get to time intelligence function today. All right, time intelligence function. We'll look at math and stats functions, and then we'll look at filter functions. I will also try to look at maybe one or two text functions. So I would need your attention. All right, thank you. Mr. Victoria, I can see you. Thank you very much for joining the class. So please, let's just follow through. All right. So there's something I always like to say, and that is that um, your analysis in Power BI is very limited if you don't know how to write DAX. Your analysis in Power BI will be very limited, even though you might know how to create good visualizations, you might know how to connect your data, you might know how to um, clean your data. Your analysis is going to be very, very limited if you cannot write good DAX formulas. You are not going to go to very complex things. It's just an hour class. What I really want to achieve is that you at least understand the fundamentals to a level that if you have to do further learning, you are going to have something to, you are going to have a platform to start from. That is the aim of this class. Yes, and we will achieve it. Okay. So I'll share my screen straight right away. Right away. So I've shared my screen now. So let us start. So let's create some objectives for this class. So at the end of this session, you should be able to know the meaning of DAX, right? You should know uses of DAX. You should know how to create. You should be able to create measures using statistical and math functions, or let me say math and stats functions, and iterator functions. You should be able to know that. You should be able to understand filter context, right? You should understand what filter context means and how it affects what you are doing. Then number 5, you should be able to alter filter context using filter functions. Then number 6, you should be able to use time intelligence. You should be able to use time intelligence functions. All right. So let us start. So let us start. What does DAX mean? So ignore everything. I'm not asking you to exactly ignore everything you have already known about DAX, but for a while, okay, let's try and pick it up from the beginning again. What is DAX? Why do we need it? Let's go back to the beginning. Why Power BI in the first place? So Power BI is used to create reports. Power BI is important because it can connect to different data sources. You can use Power BI to connect to not less than 80 different data sources. So that makes Power BI very useful. We connect to data sources using Power Query. And then when we connect, we clean our data. After cleaning our data, we load our data into the data model. After you have loaded your data into data model, the next thing you want to do is to create your relationships and set up your model, create your schema, arrange your data properly, right? After you have done that, you have laid a very good foundation now. What you want to do next is to analyze your data. So how do you analyze your data in Power BI? DAX is what you need to analyze your data in Power BI. DAX is what you need to analyze your data inside Power BI. The full meaning of DAX is data analysis expressions. We use it in Power BI to create functions like, to create things like measures. In this case now, I'll say explicit measures. I'll tell you what implicit measures mean. We also use DAX to create calculated columns, and we use DAX to create calculated tables. Okay, so let us start. Let me remove this table right here from here. I know you already know what pivot tables are from your knowledge of Microsoft Excel. So let me create a matrix. In Power BI, matrix is what looks like a pivot table that we have in Excel. So I'll click it. Then I will click on quantity here. Quantity column. Okay. And then I'll sales. Okay, let me zoom that out a bit so that you can see it. Okay, so look at what I have now. I have much like our pivot tables in Microsoft Excel. So I put quantity inside values, and I put sales district inside rows, and this is what I have. So if you notice here, just like in Excel, you have sum of quantity. That is, the quantity column that we have in our transactions table has been aggregated by summation, and it has been grouped into sales district, right? This sum of quantity that we have, summation that we performed on quantity table, quantity column in our transactions table, is known as is a measure. Is a measure. Perhaps we don't want to use quantity, and we click this drop down and we click on average. This is also possible in Excel. So this average of quantity that we have is also a measure. It's a measure. If we say we don't want average, we have used some average, we say we want max or minimum, it is also a measure, right? So measure is just a way of aggregation. So when we talk about measure, we cannot do that aggregation. Aggregation is measure, measure is aggregation. Aggregation is measure, and measure is aggregation. All right. Are you following now? Okay, thank you very much. So we use measures to aggregate, but these measures are available by default in Excel. These measures are available by default in Microsoft Excel. Both Microsoft Excel and Power BI. So they are called implicit measures. They did not kill anybody. They are implicit because they are just available by default. They have limitations, and the limitations can be overcome by using explicit measures. When we use DAX formula to create our home measure, that is known as explicit measures. So if you understand this aggregation that has happened here, this sum of quantity, max quantity, minimum quantity, average quantity, it will not be difficult for you to understand what a measure is, right? Now look at it. Let me create a card. This is another visualization here. This is a card. And I will put the same measure inside also. Quantity. Can you see? It's also sum of quantity. Like I said, I can click this drop down and say, okay, I want the maximum. That will be 6. I can click this drop down and say, I want to see the average. That will be 3.09. Right? So that is measure. It's a form, it's a way to aggregate your data. All right. So if I now don't want to use implicit measure, I already mentioned that implicit measure have their own weaknesses. Everybody has their own strengths and weaknesses. Implicit measures are not exemptions. They also have their weaknesses. The strength is that it is readily available. You don't need to write any formula. You don't need to write DAX to get implicit measures, but it is limited. And we're if I want to write DAX, measures, right? How can I do it? So to write syntax, to write DAX for measures, right? Just click on, from your home tab, just click on new measure. Another thing you can do is you can right click on the table where you want to put the measure and click on new measure. Okay. And when you have done that, yes, you can go ahead and create your measure. And then you can have your measure, it can be as simple as just having power. Oh, really? Where's my measure? Yeah, I think I have the measure. So let me call it 1 hour class. No. So let me call it total quantity 1. So I want to find the total quantity. You know, I can say, oh, okay. So maybe before we go, let me teach us DAX syntax. Right. So if you want to write DAX, what is the syntax for DAX? DAX is simply of the measure. If it is calculated column, you are write the name of the calculated column. And if it is calculated table, you are writing formula to create, write the name you want to give the calculated table. Then put equal to, then write the expression here. So the expression usually involves referencing 3 different things inside functions. Expression in DAX usually will consist of some functions that we are even familiar with in Microsoft Excel. Functions like sum, simple as that. Functions like average, functions like MAXX, MAXX, functions like mean, functions like count, functions like distinct count, functions like count rows, right? To include functions. Another thing your DAX will include is your operators. So the same operators we use in Microsoft Excel is what we use in DAX. We have equal to, we have less than, greater than, not equal to. Not equal to usually greater than and less than facing each other. Sorry, it's usually, yeah, less than and greater than facing each other. Then we usually have less than or equals to, then we have greater than or equals to. These are operations. Items, columns, we reference columns, we reference tables, and we reference measures. If you want to reference a measure, that is a measure that you have already created, open a square bracket like this. A measure you've already created. So because this file now is not a new one, I have created a lot of measures already. So these are all these you are seeing, they are measures. The name of that measure in between. That is how to reference a measure. What I'm saying is that when you want to write your DAX formula, let's say for a measure, for example, the first thing you are starting with is the name of that measure. In this case, I want to write a measure. I have named it total quantity, and I've already explained what measures do, right? Based on our knowledge of pivot tables in Excel, they help you do aggregations. Put the name here. If it is calculated table, put the name. Then put equals to, then put the expression. And I said DAX expression will usually include number one, DAX functions. Number two, operators. Equals to, like this. Not equals to is like this, right? Then greater than, then less than, then less than or equals to, greater than or equals to, right? These are the operators that we have. These are the operators that we have, and I know they are not new to you. So apart from the functions, apart from the operators, another thing that we need is that we reference things. I've mentioned that we reference measures. It's simple as that. It's not, you are not going to put it inside square table here called transactions. You know, I can just type transactions. I've referenced the table. Simple. If I want to reference a column inside a particular table, you know, a column does not exist alone. A column is always inside a table. In short, you cannot have a column unless it is existing inside a table. You cannot have a column unless it is existing inside a table. So if you want to reference a column, what you will do is that you will first write the name of the table where that column is existing. Then you open a square bracket, you write the name of the column, and you close the square bracket. This is how to reference a column. I said if you want to reference a measure, open square bracket, put the name of the measure, close the square bracket. If you want to reference a table, just write the name of the table. If you want to reference a column, column does not exist alone, it always exists inside a table. So write the name of the table first, then open the square bracket, put the name of the column, then close the square bracket. Perhaps your name of table might contain a space. If the name of your table has a space inside it, you must put that name of table inside quotation marks, something like this. You must put it inside quotation marks. Must, compulsorily, must inside quotation marks. If it contains space. If it does not contain space, well, you can choose to put it inside quotation marks. And if you choose not to put it there, you have not done anything wrong. So now you have learned the DAX syntax and you have learned the components of the expressions that we have in DAX. So the next thing now is I want to write this DAX function now. I want to call it total quantity, just like I have it here, an implicit measure here. I want to reference a column, it's quantity. It is inside transactions table. So, you know, I have to write the name of the column, the name of the table first. So this is transactions. And I'll open the square bracket and I'll put the name of the column, that is quantity. I'll close the square bracket. In my mind, think that I have written a good formula for a measure. I'll press enter. But this is wrong. See the comment here. It says a single value for column quantity in table transactions cannot be determined. This can happen when a measure formula refers to a column that contains many values without specifying an aggregation, such as max, min, count, or sum to get a single result. You cannot have naked columns inside a measure. You must aggregate. You must aggregate when you're writing a measure. Okay, so let's go ahead. So let's say we want to write average. So this is the name of the function. So just like in Excel, when you use a function in Power BI, you after typing a few letters in the name of the function, usually Power BI DAX, we call it IntelliSense here. IntelliSense will bring you suggestions about the name of that function, right? Then you can press tab to complete the name of the function and open the parentheses. Then I want to reference this and I'm okay. Then I'll close the parentheses or bracket and I'll press enter. And when I do that now, that is fine. Let me change this to, okay, average so that they can be the same thing, right? So where's my, okay, I named it total and then I went to use average. Okay, so can you see the same thing? Same thing, same thing, same thing. I like to rename this to average quantity. All right. So if you notice now, you realize that the two of them, the first one and the second one, they both have the same values. All right. On every row, the values are the same. So which means your implicit measure and explicit measure will give you the same value. But what is the difference between the two? This is implicit. Follow come. This is explicit, the one that I wrote by myself. What are the differences? All right, look at it. This is one implicit here. This is another implicit. Average of quantity, average of quantity. This is an explicit measure, right? So let me create another card. And let's bring it here. And I would put that average quantity there again. 3.09. Good. Now, number one benefit of explicit measure is that it can be reused. It can be reused. If I want to write another measure now, I can put my measure that I have just created, I can put it inside another, I can put it inside another measure. I can use it to create another measure. That is one. Number two is that when you have used a measure in different visualizations, if you modify an explicit measure, the modification will reflect in all the visualization where you have made use of that explicit measure. Let's take this for example. This is average quantity. If I rename it to AVG quantity, the name will show here and it will show here. If I rename this one, if you notice now, you see, okay, apparently now I didn't do a good job here. Good. I've done better now. Okay. If you notice now, this will become AVG quantity 1. Look at this one, AVG quantity 1. But if I come here and I rename this implicit measure and I click on rename for this visual and I name it AVG, for example, AVG implicit, you will realize that it will change here, it will not change here because they are different. That is implicit measures for you, and it's a weakness. So that is number two. Number one, I said explicit measure can be reused. That is, I can use it in another measure. I cannot reuse implicit. Number two, if I can, whatever change I make to an explicit measure, it will reflect everywhere I've used it. It's not like that for implicit measure. Then number 3, I can modify the filter context of an explicit measure. I can use an explicit measure and modify the filter context. You cannot modify the filter context of an implicit measure. You cannot modify that formula essentially because you did not even write it, right? It's automated. Okay, so that is that about that. So you have learned some things so far. Let us align back to our objectives. Number 1, you know the meaning of DAX. Number 2, you know what DAX is used for. That is, we use it to write explicit measures, to write calculated tables, and of course, to create calculated columns. You already know what a measure is from your knowledge of Microsoft Excel, that we use measures for aggregation. And I say we have implicit measure and explicit measure. Implicit are those that are readily available, just like the one we have on Excel, and of course we have it here too. And explicit measure are the ones we create by ourselves. And I've also discussed the benefits of using explicit measures over implicit measure. As a data professional, it is imperative that you learn to write DAX to create your own measures and kill completely reliance on implicit measures. All right, that's a pro tip. Okay, so we have, let's move to math and start functions now. So we have used one math and start function. So very briefly and very fast, let us create like 5 more math and start functions. Right? It's very basic, but it's powerful. So for example, I can click here now. I've created a measure for average quantity. Let us create measure for sum of quantities. So let's say total quantity 1. I'll say that is equals to sum. So that's another function. We have used average. So this is sum of what? Quantity. When you are referencing a column, I said the name of the table must be there. And quantity is a transactions table. So I'll make sure transaction is there. I'll click enter. Then I'm going to see total quantity 1 here. I can bring it here. Okay. So I don't want to waste our time. Okay, but if I created this one now, it doesn't have 1,000 separator. I can click 1,000 separator here and add it to it. If you want to create maximum, if you want to create minimum, if you want to create standard deviation, if you want to create count, this is exactly how you will do it, right? This is exactly how you will do it. So what if I want to know the distinct number of products that was sold in all these places? I want to know the distinct number of products that they offered for sale in each of these sales districts. I can use distinct count. So I earlier shared with us 3 PDF documents that contains list, like a cheat sheet that, for these DAX functions. So I hope we can refer to it and learn how to use each of these functions when they are used and the applicable syntax for each one of them. So for this one now, let's call it distinct number of products. So when you are naming your measures, try to give them good names so that you can easily identify them. Distinct number of products sold. I said that is equal to distinct count. Don't forget you can ask questions. Distinct count. What's the column name? Product ID. Product ID inside transactions table. All these are really basic. So look at it. These are the distinct number of products sold. So apparently most of the district sales districts, they sold 1559, but there are some of them that did not sell all, like this 972 and all that. Okay, I can also apply 1,000 separator here. Okay, all right, so let's move on now. So what if I want to create revenue? So let's use that opportunity to learn iterator function, and relationship function, which we call related. So already I've discussed some functions like sum and average, and I've also discussed distinct count. And I've mentioned that other mathematical functions are just like it, right? So that we don't waste our precious time. Okay, now look at my transactions table here. I don't have price. Price is not here. How will I do it? I want to create a column for revenue. I don't want to create column actually, but I want to create a function. I want to create a measure. Pardon me. I want to create a measure for revenue. So how do we do it? First thing, how do we even bring price? How do we bring price to the stage? We can use related function. We can use related function. So first thing, let us look at how we can bring price to this place, right? Let's see that how we can create calculated column. We have been creating calculate measures, explicit measures. Let's calculate a column as well. I'll go home and I'll click on new column. Then, just like with measures, I will specify a name for my, I'll specify a name for my column. I want to call it price. Then I'll put equal to, then I'll type the expression. I want to use related function. Related. What is related function used to do? Related function functions like VLOOKUP in Microsoft Excel. That is, we use it to bring a field from a related table. There's relationship between, there is already relationship between transactions table and product lookup table. We have created a relationship already when we were setting up the data model. So when you have a table that is two tables that are related like that with a relationship, you can bring some values from one of them to another table by using a related function. So in this case now, my product lookup table contains a column called price. You know, the actual name of the column is actually product retail price. I need that column inside my transactions table. How will I do it? I will use related function, right? So, and I've activated my related function. Is saying I should provide a column name. Which column do I want? Retail. Product lookup. I told you when you are referencing a column, name of the table must come first, then name of column will follow. You can close the parentheses, and if it is the last one that is open, Power BI will close it by itself. So press enter. And if you notice now, another column will be created. So I need to differentiate a little bit between explicit measures and calculated column. Calculated column don't require aggregation because they have row context. If you notice now, you see that when I created a calculated column, DAX returned a value for each of the rows. DAX returned a separate value for each of the rows inside the table. DAX returned a separate value for each of the rows in the table, which means that calculated columns have row context. Don't be fazed by all these jargons. Row context will simply means calculated column is evaluated row by row. Is calculated column is evaluated from one row to another, or calculated column is evaluated for every row in a particular table. In measures, there is no row context. Naturally, what we have is what? Filter context. That is, DAX measures are evaluated based on an applicable filter context for a particular visualization. Right. Okay, now, so let's go. So now that I have created revenue, I mean, I've brought price, you know, it's easy for me to create this revenue now. I can delete this, okay, so that we can see it. I have quantity already, and I have brought in price. I've created price now. So I can create another column that will just be quantity times price, and that will be my revenue, right? So I'll call this revenue or sales, and I'll say that's equals to quantity. Don't forget the name of the table must be there when I'm referencing a column, and multiply by price. The name of the column must be there because it's a column. I'll press enter. And if you notice now, revenue column has been created, and quantity times price was evaluated for each of the rows inside this table. That is row context, just like I had earlier explained. Okay. Now, since I have my revenue now, I can create a measure now for total revenue. So I can click new measure. Then I'll call the name total rev 1. I said that is equals to what? Sum. Sum of what? Total revenue. Sorry. Sum of transactions. Transactions revenue. Revenue is the name of the column. Transactions is the name of the table. You know, when we are referencing that column, we'll need it too, right? So I can bring total revenue here. I can delete this one so that we can have more room. So that's total revenue, 1,764,546.44. Now, what if I don't want this? What I'm saying is, what if I don't want to create columns? As a professional data analyst, you should understand that creating columns is not desirable. Creating columns is not desirable. Creating columns is not desirable. Creating calculated columns is not desirable. So when you are creating columns for numbers, try to avoid it. Try to avoid creating calculated columns for numerical data. Calculated column is best used for categorical variables, maybe something you want to put inside slicers. Something you want to put inside slicers. I'm going to create another one for us with one logical function. We want to put something inside slicers, right? You can create a calculated column, or you want to use, you need a column that I want to use in for filtering. But for numerical columns like this, try and desist from using calculated columns to achieve this. Best thing to do is to use a measure to do this. Okay, now, so let's do this without writing, without using calculated column. So let's me right click on my table and then click on new measure. So I want to call it total rev, let's say M total rev 1, M for measure. So how will I calculate my revenue? Normally, imagine I want to calculate revenue. So how is revenue calculated? Revenue is calculated by multiplying price by quantity sold, line by line. Don't forget that measures is used for aggregation. So, but I don't want to aggregate price, then multiply by aggregated quantity. This is what I'm saying. Look at it. If you are selling, if you sell two items, you sold pepper and you sold tomato. You sold two baskets of pepper at 15 naira each, and you sold three baskets of tomatoes at 100 naira each. Two baskets of pepper, 50 naira each. Three baskets of tomatoes, 200 naira each. You will not say, okay, to calculate the total amount of money you made, though, I will add all the quantities together. That is 2 baskets plus 3 baskets, 5. Then you say, I will add all my price together. That is 50 naira plus 100 naira, 150. I will now multiply 150 by 5. I will get 750. You know, I will be wrong. To calculate revenue, what I need to do is multiply quantity by price, line by line. That is, for tomatoes, I will say 100 times 3, 300. For pepper, I will say 50 times 2, and that is 100. And my total revenue is 400, not 750. Right? So, if you will now want to, and don't forget, we said DAX measures don't have they don't have row context. It is only in uh, calculated column that we have row context. So, how can I do a calculation row by row before I aggregate in Power BI? That is where iterator functions come in. I want to perform an iteration. I want to perform calculations row by row. And after performing it, I want to aggregate, right? So I want to sum. So I'll use SUMX. So that is the difference between sum and SUMX. Sum just help you add a series of numbers together. SUMX will, number one, perform row by row calculation without creating a column. Then number two, it will add all the answers together. There is also AVERAGEX. There is MAXX, right? There is COUNTX. There is MINX. What will AVERAGEX do? AVERAGEX will evaluate an expression line by line and find the average of all the answers obtained. What will COUNTX do? COUNTX will evaluate an expression line by line and find the count of all the values that were obtained. So these are called iterator functions. So SUMX, what do I want to add? Inside which table? The first parameter that I need is the table name. That is, inside which table do I want to perform a row by row expression that I want to aggregate? That is transactions, right? And after you have put the name of the table, the next thing for you to do is to put a comma. When you put your comma now, the next thing, if you are following here, if you are following this syntax, is your expression. So what expression do you want to perform within that table for every row before your aggregation? What I want to do is simple. I want to multiply quantity by price, line by line. By the way, I don't have the price here, but I have it in a related table. So I'll say related product lookup, product retail price. I'll close bracket for related, and I'll close bracket for SUMX, and I'll press enter. So that is it. This way now, I have completely avoided using calculated columns, and I have used measures to do it. If you see now, I'm going to have the same answer. This was done with a calculated table, and this was done with an explicit measure. So now what it means, I can come here and delete this revenue because I do not have any need of it. And when I've done that completely now, I can click on price as well and take the same action. Okay, so I've given a template for iterator functions, and that is how we can use it for every other functions. All right, so let's move on. Let's move on. So that is math and start functions. So I've also explained filter context, right? So how do you now alter filter context using filter conditions? How do we alter filter context using filter functions? Okay, so let's look at maybe 2 or 3 filter functions. Okay, or better, let's just look at 2. Let's look at the most important one. Let's look at calculate. We look at all, and we look at calculate, we look at all, and we look at filter. Okay, so let's go. So if I can actually delete this, right? Let's delete it. If I create a card, I can put total revenue. Where's M total revenue? Okay, this is it. I can actually delete this. So the total revenue is 1.76 million, and that is not news. So what if I want to find, what if I want to just get the revenue for just females? I don't need the revenue for males. I just need the revenue for female. How will I do it? I need the revenue just for female. How will I achieve that? Okay. So what I will do, I will create a new measure called, let's call it revenue female, right? You can give it any name you like to give it. So what is important for you to learn here is that if I want to calculate revenue for female now, it is this same revenue I'm going to use. I don't need to calculate revenue afresh again. What I'm going to do is that I will just need to alter the filter context for this particular measure, right? The current filter context accommodates both male and female, but I want to limit it to only female, and that is why I will use calculate function. So I'll say female revenue. This has gone away again, sorry. So I would have to run it afresh. Just click on new measures. Okay, so I would say that, let's say female rev 1, I say is equals to calculate function. That is the function we use to alter filter conditions. If you have an expression that you want to alter the filtering condition, the filtering criteria, I want to alter the filter context, think of calculate function. So the first thing you are asked to do in calculate function, or the first thing that you need, or the first parameter required, is expression. What's the expression that I want to alter the context? That's my total revenue, right? So this is it. I told you to reference a measure, just put the name of the measure inside square bracket. So I'll put a comma now. Then the filter, what's the filter that I want? I want gender. Gender inside customer lookup table to be equal to what? F. So I can know it is F because I already know this table offhand. So let me hit enter, then go to that table so that you can see where I got the F from. So the F is not constant. I might be working with some tables that they will write the female completely, and you might be working with some that they will not even write female, they will write woman. So you need to check your table and see how it is written. But look at this, gender is M, F, M, F. It's just M and F. I don't know if there's any other after M and F. In fact, there's no hermaphrodite, and uh there's no SGBTQ or whatever. I don't know what you guys call it. So everything is M and F. So I just needed to tell Power BI, okay, that okay, I only want my revenue to be calculated where gender is equals to F. So if I create, no, I don't want this. Let's just use a card. If I put a card here now, I can see the revenue for female. I can see Fem Rev 1. This is revenue for female, right? So let's click here. If I want to create for male, it's simple. I can just right click here now and click on new measure. So I'll click on male, I'll type male rev 1. That's the name I want to give it. I told you your own can be any name, and I'll just paste this, right? I can remove all of this. Then instead of F here, I just put hem. I press enter. So that is, I've altered the filtering condition. So this is male rev 1. So this is the sales for male. This is the sales for female. Let's put all of that. Okay, so that is how to water filter condition. Let's do another one. What if I want to find the sales for the top 500 products? Like I want to find the sum of money made from sales of the top 500 products if we rank our products in ascending or descending order, right? I can use top n to do that. So I'll right click and I'll say new measure. So let's say 500. So what should we use first? Let's use first 350 products. That is, we have in this particular example, we have 1,560 products. Let us see the amount of money made from the top 350 products if we rank them in descending order. That is, ranking them from the product that made the highest sales to the product that made the least amount of money. So let's call it top 350. I'll say it is equals to calculate, because what we are still calculating is still revenue. It's still revenue. We are just modifying the filter context the way we like. When we were doing for female, we modified the filter context to give us just values for female. When we were doing for male, we modified it to give us just values for male. Now I want to modify it to give me the sum of sales for only the top 350 products if we rank them in descending order of the amount of money they made, right? So the function I will use here to filter for the top 350 products is top n. Top n, and n value, that is the number I want to find. In this case, it is 350, right? And then the table where I want to order them is my what? Product lookup table. I'll put a comma. Order expression. What's the other expression? I want to order it by what? Total sales, right? If I put a comma, I'm going to instruct Power BI or my DAX. Do I want to sort ascending? I want to sort descending. I'm sorting descending. You can put a comma to put another order expression, but I don't need another one. I want only one order expression. I'll close my bracket for top n and I'll close it again for calculate and I'll press enter. So that is, when that is done, I will get the top. So let me put my top 350 here. So when the total number of products, which is 1,560 products, made this amount of money, this is the amount of money we made from the top 350 products. The top 350 products, you will see that this is above 30%, right? So these are the way you get insights from your data. All I'm trying to do all along is trying to get insight from my data. So we're going to leave this part very soon, then go to time intelligence functions. Okay, let me create a matrix. Okay, what if I want to create percentages? Let me park all this. Let me put all of them at one side. Okay. So now, what if I want to do, where's my hem revenue, what I created now? Okay, this is it. And then for rows, okay, this time around, okay, let me put dates. So we can work with this. I don't want quarter. I don't want day. Hey, actually, I should want day. Okay. I can. All right. So what if I want to know the percentage of total? What if I want to know the percentage of total that each of these did? I can simply right click and create a measure. I want to know the percentage of total. I want to know percentage of total. This is 45,539. 45,539 is what percentage of the total sales that was made. That is 1.7 million. So let me say, call this percentage of total. I say it is equals to. So to get percentage of total, I believe I'll just divide this amount. That is, I want to reference the measure now. M total revenue. That this amount now is M total revenue, right? Divided by the total M revenue. That is, I don't want M total revenue to be filtered. I want to divide total revenue by total revenue. But the one on top, I want it filtered, so I'll leave it the way it is. The one at the bottom, I don't want it filtered, so I will not leave it like this. I would use calculate. Expression is M total revenue. Then the filter is what? All. I use all function. All means that I want to return all the items that we have. I want to return the total amount unfiltered. Right. I'll close the bracket and I'll press enter. Oh, okay. I've already used this name before. So let me put M percentage of total. And that is it. I can format this as percentage. Just click on percentage here. And that is it. Okay. Time is fast spent. So let's say in another 5-10 minutes, let's do time intelligence function. So this is how much I made in January 97. What if I can create a measure that will show me how much I've made year to date? This is January. As of February, I made 44,000. Year to date will become 45 plus 44. As at March, I made 50,000. What if I've made so as at March, I made 50,000. So which means I have made 45 plus 44 plus 50. So can I create a column that will show me year to date achievements? And I will not waste time on that. So what I will do is I will right click on this and I'll create a measure to create year to date transaction. So there are two functions that can be used for this, but let's just use one because of time. So let's call this YTD sales. I say it is equals to totals YTD. Can see total YTD. Expression is what? Total sales. No, actually M total revenue 1. Then dates is what? calendar. My date is inside calendar lookup. Right? That's my date. Then do I have a filter? Do I have any filter? If I have any filter, I'll put it there. If I have none, I will ignore. And year end is December 31. If you have another year end, you can make it known. Just like in Excel, you see that the filter is in square bracket. Anything in square bracket means it's not compulsory. And then anything Y end is also in square bracket. So it means it's not compulsory. You know, there are organizations that end their year in June. There are those that end their year in September, right? So that is why year date is a parameter here. Perhaps you want to end your year before December or after December, you can specify when your year is ending. Okay, but for me, I don't have all those parameters. I just use TOTALYTD. If I bring it here now, you will see that this thing will have calculated total year-to-date sales for me. Can you see? In January, it was 45,000. February, it was 89,000. That is 45 plus 44. March, it was 139. That's 150. April plus 50, 182. Plus 44 is this. Plus 45 is this. Then at the end of January 1997, December, we have 565238. January 1998 is going to start from the beginning again, which is 98. February made 94, add it to it, and like that, like that, like that. It is not only YTD sales that we have. We also have QTD. I mean, you can create quarter to date. In fact, you can create month to date. Look at it. I will not do quarter to date because of time. It's the same thing, same procedure, same everything. Let's just create okay, let's create everything, right? So let's create the two. So let's say I will end this call by 11:30. So let me call this QTD sales. I will say that is equals to total QTD. Expression is what? Total rev 1. That is the measure I want to use. Then date is what? Calendar date. Then I don't need filter and any other thing, right? So I'll close the bracket. And if you notice, in fact, in this case, there's no year end criteria or year end option, right? Because it is quarter. So I will scroll down now and bring QTD. And you notice that it is adding it every 3 months. 45 plus 44 plus 50. Then April it starts again. Then July it starts again. Then October it starts again. Okay, the last one here, before I move to the next time intelligence function, which will be the fourth one. So what about month to date? Let's do month to date. So I'll just say this is MTD sales. I'll say this is equals to total MTD. MTD means month to date. Expression is M total rev, and date is calendar. That is where I have my date, calendar date. I'll close the bracket and I'll press enter. Right? I'll look for my MTD here. And if you notice now, it's looking like this, that is makes no difference. But look at if I expand January 1 was 706. January 2 was 13. 13 plus 7 is 2000. 2000 plus 1 2 is 32. Is 33 now, etc. like that. So it will be adding for each month. By the time that month ends, I will pick another month. It is going to start from the beginning again. That is how YTD, QTD, and MTD works. Now, so let's move on. Let's take another two functions. Let's look at DATEADD and same period last year. So in your analysis, sometimes you want to know want to compare what you are currently doing as sales with what you are doing in the previous year. For example, if as this is July 2024, maybe my sales is in July 2024 is 1,000 naira. I want to compare, okay, July last year, what was sales? Okay, so that is why we sometimes ask for same period last year if you want to compare two periods. So let's create a measure for same period last year. We're going to do it in two ways. Okay, because what if you need value for 3 years ago? So let's call this previous year sales. You say this is same period last year. It's a function, same period last year. And then the only parameter this requires to function is date. I'll just put calendar date inside. And I'll press enter. Okay, please apologies. This one does not work alone, right? So I will use calculate. Calculate function expression is hem total rev. Then my filter is same period last year. We use it as filter function. Use it to filter. And the date is calendar dates. And I'll close the bracket again for calculate. I'll press enter. So I'll come here to look for previous period sales. There shouldn't be anything for 1997 because there was no previous period, right? For 1997, there was no previous period. There was no previous period. There's no 1996 data. But for 1998, we have previous period. So, like, look at January now. This year we made 98,000. Last year was 45,000. So we put the 45,000 here. February, what we made this year is 94,000. I mean 1998 when I say this year now. Previous year it was 44,000. So the 44,000 is here. March, 98,000. Previous March was 50,000. 50,000 is here. So, all right. So what if it is previous month sales you want to find? What if we are not interested in previous year sales? What if we want to find previous month sales? How do we go about it? For previous month sales, right? So same period last year will not help us this time around because same period last year will just take year back 1 year. In fact, this same period last year, what if you want to find sales 2 years ago, want to find last year? Then we also want to find 2 years ago. You know, same period last year can only do one, which is last year. 2 years ago, same period last year cannot do it. That is where we need DATEADD. So let's call it previous month sales. We say this is equals to what? Previous month sales is equals to what? Calculate. What's my expression? Total revenue. And my filter is what? DATEADD. What's my date? Calendar. And number of intervals. I want to go back just 1 month. So I put -1. And the interval is what? Month. I'll close the bracket here. Close the bracket for calculate. I'll press enter. So with this now, I can get my previous month sales. This one is very easy to check, right? So for January, there's no previous month, of course. January, there was no previous month. January, there was no previous month because there's no data for December 1996. But February, there was previous month. So the sales for January, if you notice now, is the previous month for February. Sales for November is the previous month for December. And that is how it works. So let's calculate 2 more variables. Okay. Then I think we can close the class. So what if I want to calculate year on year? year-on-year sales, that is year-on-year. I want to find the difference between the current year and the previous year. Then I will now divide it by the previous year. Difference between the current year and the previous year, I will divide it by previous year. And month-on-month sales will be difference between current year, current month, and previous month. Then I will divide it by what? Previous month. So let's create it. So I'll say year-on-year sales growth is, I'll say, is equals to what? What's current month? So what's current month sales? That is M revenue minus previous month sales. This previous, okay, year on year will be previous year sales. If it is month on month, it will be previous month sales. Year on year is previous year sales. So I will divide this by previous year. So what's my previous year? Previous year sales. Enter. So for 1997, you know I'm going to have error, right? Year on year sales growth. See, infinity. Let's make it percentage. So this will be 4%. I can see where we declined. Everywhere you see minus, that means the sales declined. That is, the previous year, around that same period, we made more money. Yeah. Okay. So this one that is giving us error, what if we don't want it to give us error? That is the beauty of using divide function. So instead of using slash to do the division, I can actually use divide. I'll put the numerator and I've it already, and this is my denominator here, and I will close the bracket. I'll press enter now. And you see that the infinity will disappear because divide function has an internal mechanism that handles error. Okay, to close this class now, let's do month on month. Pretty same period, pretty same formula, right? So it's just the only thing different is just that instead of year on year, I'm now doing month on month, right? So there's the MOM, month on month. This will be divide. Total revenue minus previous month sales. I'll divide that by what? Previous month sales. Close the bracket, and that is it. Okay, so nobody has asked any questions since. Okay, perhaps you want to ask any question in my DM, please don't hesitate to come. So if you are watching this video for if you're watching this video for the first time, or you are coming to this channel for the first time, make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can always get information on when new videos are released. The video will be available on the channel. You can always watch it anytime you want to watch it, and you can also refer it to those that you think this video might be a bit helpful for. So perhaps you have questions, you can always reach out to me, and then there is also training is also available at very affordable rates. All right, thank you very much. I think we should round up the class now. Okay, so our month on month is up, and I can see how sales is dropping and how it is increasing over time in the company currently under review. Thank you very much for joining today's class. Somebody is online. If you are the one, say hi. If you are the person online, say hello. Just type it. All right, thank you. Good night.